Welcome to today's webinar about integrating Apple in the enterprise. My name is Nick Thompson and I will be your host today. Today's agenda is going to cover a couple of different things. We're going to dive into some of the industry trends that we're currently seeing in the market right now. We'll compare PC management to Mac management, translating some of those common terms that you hear in the PC management world into what that really means into Mac management. And then we'll talk about how to actually integrate Macs and iOS devices into your existing environments. The presentation will last about 30 minutes, and then we'll have up to another 30 minutes after that for some Q&A. So again, encourage you to use the chat and Q&A portion of today's presentation. Let's get into our first topic. Industry trends. We want to take a look at what we're seeing out there that's leading to those needing to integrate Macs into the enterprise. So in 2014, we conducted a survey around the state of Apple adoption in the enterprise. We learned a lot and really confirmed a lot about what we've been seeing. First, the percent of Apple devices in the enterprise has more than doubled over the past 3 years. More departments and employees within companies are using Apple devices. That's iPhones, iPads, Macs, all of the above. And when you look at Apple's earning reports, this is really no surprise. Every single earnings report that Apple comes out with, they state that they are now in 90% or 98%, and the number keeps going up, of Fortune 500 companies. So it's really no surprise that organizations are increasing the adoption of Apple products. Second, and even more interesting, is that 98% of companies expect a significant growth of Apple devices in the next 3 years. We are already seeing this happen as more and more organizations are deciding to deploy Apple products. These two stats really show us that the enterprise is not only considering Apple, but they're actually deploying large quantities of hardware. If you'd like to see this full report, by the way, check out the link that's listed below there. To help us understand why companies are choosing to deploy Apple hardware, we asked about user preference in our survey. And we found that an overwhelming majority of companies were choosing to deploy Apple because their users were demanding it. We really call this trend the consumerization of IT. And it's been slowly happening since really the original iPhone launch. Sometimes an executive may come in and they demand to have their iPhone and Mac, and that drives the adoption from IT. Other times it's a whole department, like let's say marketing, that prefers to use Macs over PCs because of the software that they need to use. But this trend But the new trend that we're seeing is that new employees that are entering the workforce are demanding to work on the platform that they grew up on and are most comfortable with. By giving employees the choice of what operating system they want to run, it really allows them to be more productive, and it helps organizations attract better talent. It ends up being a win-win for both employees and management. And you can see all the different reasons, why user preferences have been choosing Apple products. They're highly productive. Sometimes it's that executive mandate. Sometimes we even see that it's recruiting incentives to bring over the best and brightest talent. A third trend that we see in technology right now is really that services are becoming platform agnostic. These are the cloud services that you see out there, or the software as a service. And they don't really care what operating system you're running on in order to work. Right? Salesforce was a huge driver of this early on. And now you see all kinds of services moving to the cloud, including CRM, file storage, backup, wikis, finance, productivity apps, you name it. You go out there and you see all these companies, they've got some sort of cloud in their logo now. All these work within just a standard web browser, and they don't care if you're using a Mac or a PC. This, again, is driving the adoption of Apple. So why are people choosing Apple products? Well, it's a few different reasons. First off, Apple makes some really great software. OS X and iOS are just world-class operating systems that are very secure. They do multitasking extremely well, and there's a lot of apps that run on there. In addition to really great software, well, they make amazing hardware. The hardware that Apple puts out there is some of the best in the industry. There's been some old reports that looked back at, boy, what's the best PCs that run Windows? Well, some of them ended up being Mac hardware because they're so good. And frankly, they just look really nice. They last a long time too. Not only that though, but they're easy to deploy as well. And we'll show you why they're easy to deploy in just a little bit here. So great software, great hardware, and they're pretty easy to deploy. Not only that though, in the last year here, there was a pretty big announcement that really solidified Apple's commitment to the enterprise, and that's the Apple and IBM partnership. So they partnered to transform the mobile enterprise by delivering a new generation of apps called IBM Mobile First for iOS that really connect users to big data and analytics that IBM's great at right on their iOS devices. IBM has already started releasing apps for many different verticals out there, and there are far more on the way. So those are the trends that we're seeing. Now that we have some background into really what's happening in the industry, let's look at how PC management compares to Mac management. And to do so, I'm going to translate some of the common Windows management terms into Mac management terms. A little bonus history lesson for everyone out there. In the middle, this is the Rosetta Stone. And the Rosetta Stone translated Egyptian hieroglyphics to Greek. It was a key tool to understand really how the Egyptian culture communicated. So just as the Rosetta Stone translated languages, so too it's going to help us translate Windows into Mac in this little analogy here. So first up, when you think of deploying PCs, you really think of imaging right away. And one of the most common ways of imaging is something called PXE Boot. And PXE Boot is really just imaging over the network that creates a bootable image right on the PC. So what does that translate into the Mac world? Well, on OS X, there's something called NetBoot. And NetBoot does something very, very similar to PXE Boot, where it essentially puts the Mac in a special state to receive an operating system over the network. A quick shameless plug on the Casper suite, we have a little tool called Casper Imaging that works with NetBoot to accomplish the same thing. So PXE Boot on the Windows side, NetBoot on the Mac side. After you get your PCs imaged, you typically want to start deploying some policies. And that's commonly called a group policy object or a GPO. And a GPO is just a set of commands that tell the PC to behave a certain way, to set various values to settings to tell it how to behave. So how is that done on the Mac? Well, on the Mac, there's something called configuration profiles. And a configuration profile is just an XML file that does something very similar to a GPO. It simply sets settings for you. In addition to profiles, you can also do terminal commands. So terminal commands would be the command line level. That would be the equivalent to the command line on PCs. That let you execute really any sort of default settings that are on there. So on the PC side, again, group policy objects. On the Mac side, configuration profiles and terminal commands. Windows has a software update server that they communicate to get any sort of patches, right? That's kind of the next step in management is after you get your PCs imaged and then put the policies on there, you want to make sure the operating system is up to date. Well, Apple has the exact same mechanism, except they do it through their App Store app. And the App Store app communicates to Apple's software update server, and it grabs a list of any sort of software updates that Apple has published. In fact, you can tell a Mac to even go to a custom software update server. So if you wanted to maintain your own software update server, you could configure Macs to talk to ones that you essentially control yourself. Pretty neat. Next up in our translation here is packages and images. So after you've patched any sort of OS stuff, you want to get the software onto your PCs or Macs. And on the PC side, you've got MSI files, which is a Microsoft installer file, or an ISO file, which is really an image of like a CD or DVD, or it could be a disk image as well too. On the Mac side, that translates over into .pkg files, or package files, and .dmg files, or a disk mountable image. So really, these things are very, very similar here. MSI, again, is a PKG file, and an ISO file is a DMG file. How do you create these? Well, on the PC side, there's a couple of different ways to do it. Here are just some of the most popular package builders on the left. And on the right is our product called Composer. And Composer is part of the Casper suite that lets you create your own PKG files. You can also do PKG files via the command line, but we think using Composer is just a lot easier than using the command line. So after you get all your software on your PCs, you typically want to move to a support model where you need to remote into them. And on the Windows side, Microsoft has a really great tool called Windows Remote Desktop that communicates over the network and talks to a PC where you can control it. Well, on the Mac, there's a very, very similar product, and it's called Apple Remote Desktop, or ARD as it's sometimes called. And it also does over-the-network communication to a Mac that lets you control it. It should be noted, too, as part of the Casper suite, we have something called Casper Remote, which lets you do something very, very similar. Sticking to the theme of servicing the end users, most of the time when a user needs something from IT, they typically do this. They fill out a help desk ticket and they send it off to IT, and IT does what they need to do. Well, on the Mac side of things, we've invented a piece of software that we call self-service. And self-service is it's like your internal app store for your company that you can populate as IT with all the common things that your employees need, hopefully reducing the number of help desk tickets that you need to do. Next, we've got some deployment programs. So I couldn't quite find a perfect analogy for PCs on this one, but on the Mac side of things, Apple has done some really amazing things with deployment programs. They've come out with something called Device Enrollment Program, or DEP. And what DEP means is it allows you to buy Macs and iOS devices directly from Apple and have them be automatically enrolled by the time they get to the end user. This is something where Apple's really leading the way on. Again, there's really nothing out there that's equivalent to that for the Windows side of things. Somebody would have to physically touch a PC to get it enrolled. On this way, it is direct from the manufacturer, ready to be enrolled. It's really great. If you're doing anything with Apple, sign up for these programs. They're free. Go to deploy.apple.com and sign up. On the PC side, when you look at some industry certifications out there, well, the Microsoft Certified System Engineer is probably one of the more standard certs that you get. Well, Apple has very similar ones too. They've got authorized training centers all across the United States. In fact, we here at Jamf are an authorized training center of Apple. And we also have certifications that we do ourselves. So we certify folks to become Casper admins. And we've got a whole litany of certifications that you can take with that. So really, when you look at enterprise management as a whole, that is Microsoft System Center for the PC side. On the Mac side, that is the full Casper suite. We are like SCCM, but for Macs. So hopefully that translation guide helped you out a bit here. And since we're talking a lot about Casper Suite now, I want to give you an overview of really what the Casper Suite is. To start off, we are Jamf software, and we help organizations succeed with Apple. We've been managing Macs way back in 2002, long before these things were popular. And the reason why I bring this up is because sometimes people confuse Jamf with Casper Suite. The organization is Jamf, and our main product is the Casper Suite. And that's really a set of administrative tools that help you manage Apple devices. At the heart of this suite is the JSS, or the Jamf Software Server. That's the management server component. It also includes a set of applications that run natively on Mac OS X. These apps are used for Mac management by building packages for deployment, that's the Composer, remote access to client machines, that's that Casper Remote, imaging, that's Casper Imaging, as well as enrollment. It also includes applications for end users such as Casper Focus and self-service. All of these together make up the Casper Suite. Now, the JSS, or again, the Jamf Software Server, really acts like a web server which communicates to your devices. The JSS can run on an OS X, Windows, or Linux server for on-premise deployments, and will run on just about any modern server that you have out there. Do make sure you check out our tech specs, though. And we also offer a service where we can host the JSS for you in the cloud. Whenever you start sending commands to an iPad or an iPhone, the JSS talks to something called the Apple Push Notification Server, or APNS for short. And I want to highlight this because this is really how the framework of Apple management works. I'm going to highlight iOS first and then move on to Mac. So it always starts with enrollment. And after enrollment, the APNS server maintains a constant connection to your iOS devices so that you don't have to. The iPad then communicates to the JSS and receives any commands that you send it, or configuration profiles, or apps. It works great. This is Apple's architecture for mobile device management. I'm going to show you what this looks like inside of the JSS here. This is a screenshot of the JSS. And we're looking at configuration profiles right now. Again, that was that main thing that lets you configure both iOS and Macs. And it was very similar to group policy objects if we think back to the PC world. Highlighted here is really what the configuration profile can do. From passcodes to restrictions, Wi-Fi settings, VPN settings, mail, etc. There's a lot that's in there. In the JSS, you can also choose who gets a configuration profile, so you can scope it to a set of users. And you can choose how this configuration profile gets installed, whether it's automatically via push through the APNS server, or if it's put in something like self-service. Another component of mobile device management, or MDM, are commands that you can send to a device. This is a list of the commands that you can send to an iOS device, and Macs too, from locking it, clearing the passcodes, or just wiping it altogether. Mac management is really similar to managing iOS devices in the fact that it also uses the mobile device management architecture. After enrollment, communication happens again via the APNS server, and profiles are pushed to the Mac for various settings. In addition to using MDM to manage Macs, the Casper suite also installs a binary within OS X. This is known as the Jamf agent. And this runs in the background as a launch daemon and communicates directly back to the JSS over HTTPS. A hidden management account is also created with admin rights. Having an agent and a hidden management account on your Mac allows you to execute command line commands, including scripts and installing packages. The Casper suite really includes a number of these pre-built commands and scripts common for Mac management. We call those policies inside of the JSS. So there are really two tools at your disposal to manage Macs, both configuration profiles, which operate within the MDM framework that Apple has built, and policies that can really be anything that you can do via the command line. Since configuration profiles and MDM commands are very similar to Macs, I want to show you what it looks like for policies here. So this is the policies page now in the JSS for Mac management. And again, right here, this is what a policy can do. Installing a package, running a script, configuring disk encryption, adding local accounts, binding the Mac, setting a firmware password, running maintenance things. You can also tell the policy when to run. We call this a trigger. It could be at startup, at login, at logout, at a recurring check-in. By default, the recurring check-in is every 15 minutes, but you can change that. You can choose how often a policy runs, and again, you can choose who gets the policy and how it's delivered. So there's really a lot that you can do with a policy. So MDM for configuration profiles plus policies for command line commands. Let's look now at how you actually integrate this stuff into your existing environments. So in those previous demos there, it always started with enrollment. How do you do enrollment? Well, it's really quite easy. On an iOS, you can either do it via Apple Configurator if you're doing a whole bunch at once over a USB cable. Users can enroll themselves via a web address, or you can use Device Enrollment Program, or again, DEP for automatic enrollment, which makes it a lot easier. On the Mac, very similar too. You've got, again, DEP for automatic enrollment, and you've got user-initiated enrollment via a URL. But on the Mac, you can also do imaging, where you can bake it right into the image that you do. Or you can also scan a network, and that's our Recon app. So you can scan a range of IP addresses to find Macs that are not enrolled, and then enroll them remotely. So after you get them enrolled, you have to worry about them kind of on your network. And what's really nice is that there are so many universal standards out there now. When you think about Macs and PCs, universal standards have really just leveled the playing ground. And that starts with hardware ports. It's not called a universal serial bus for nothing. It is the same on a Mac as on a PC. In fact, you can use your favorite mouse that you use on a PC on a Mac. Network protocols are the same. A Mac hooks onto a network just like a PC does. Whether that's over Wi-Fi or over Ethernet, it behaves the same way. File types are interoperable now between Macs and PCs, from standard just images to PDFs to zip files to even the Microsoft Office files. Shared network drives are accessible too on the Mac. A Mac has no problem mounting in a SMB drive so that you can access shared drives that are stored on, like, say, a Microsoft server. Printers and drivers are very similar too. You don't have to get a different printer just because you have a Mac, or you don't have to get different devices out there just because you have a Mac. These things all work together now. And software titles are the same across Macs and PCs. Microsoft Office has been one of the longest running set of applications out there for the Mac. Then when you think about directory services, and the most common one out there is Active Directory. We hear this question all the time. Can I join a Mac to Active Directory? Well, the answer is a resounding yes. Yes, you can. You can join a Mac to Active Directory. And all the tools are built into OS X. The screenshot that you see right there is a screenshot of the directory utility, which you can manually go through and bind it to AD, or you can use the Casper suite to create a policy that says bind all your Macs to AD. It works great. So you could use AD for authentication onto the Mac, or you could use AD just for network services, whatever you'd like to do. Then you've got Exchange or Office 365 environments. Well, since about 2007, Apple has included Exchange support right into Mac OS X. In fact, they pay Microsoft a small license for every Mac that they sell to license this technology. That means you, as a user, can just plug in their information, their email address and their password, and the native Mac OS X apps and the native iOS apps communicate back to the Exchange server. It's just data, and the apps take care of all that for you. When it comes to security tools, Apple has a lot of security tools built right in. If you're looking to do encryption, you want to use their File Vault 2, which again, the Casper suite can help you manage. If you want to keep track of malware, well, Apple has something called Gatekeeper, which limits where you can get apps from. Apple has done something that where they require third-party developers to get signed by Apple. And again, that's a setting that you can manage in the Casper suite. You want to consider VPN, and Apple's built in all the different VPN profiles right into their network configuration tab in System Preferences. So you can plug in any sort of VPN settings that you're currently using. And you do want to consider an antivirus. And a lot of third-party companies do this. The reason why I say antivirus for Mac is because you want your Mac to be a good citizen on the network. You don't want it to accidentally pass viruses on to other PCs is the most common thing that happens out there. You don't typically see a lot of antivirus for OS X, but rather you don't want stuff to be passed on. So you want it to be treated as a good citizen on the network. And then when it comes to inventory, most of the time, if you have a lot of PCs out there, you're using, again, SCCM, and you want to have all of your Mac inventory live in there too. Well, we offer a plugin that lets you take all of your inventory from the Casper suite and move it right into SCCM. Works great. So now, if you're looking at for any sort of help in integrating Macs into your large organization, well, you're in luck because we've recently announced an alliance with IBM. And IBM has begun offering services to deploy Macs at scale to the enterprise via their cloud. And it's using the Casper suite at the heart of it. We're thrilled to be working with IBM as they bring a wealth of enterprise expertise to any organizations looking to deploy Macs. We are recommending IBM's Global Technology Services Group as a systems integrator for customers looking for that service. Reach out to them and learn more about their integration offerings. With that, if you also want to reach out to us to get started, we've got people that are ready to talk to you about how to do this specifically for your environment. Give us a call, send us an email. We've got folks on our live chat on our website that you can talk to and really get started with there. In fact, if you also click on our community tab, we've got something out there called Jamf Nation. And Jamf Nation is a free discussion forum that houses over 20,000 Mac IT admins that are using either Casper Suite or just in the industry in general. And you can communicate with them and talk with them and see what they're doing as well too. If you'd like to also check out our resources page, we've got a lot more webinars online. We just kind of barely scratched the surface when it comes to Mac management. There's so much more. You can dive deeper into how to manage File Vault, or kind of the deeper basics of Casper Suite, or how to do one-to-one deployments if you're in education as well too. So with that, I want to thank you all for attending. Hopefully this was informative for you guys, and thank you very much. Have a great day.